With that, I'll turn it over to Tom to talk about the next
Okay.
budget presentation here, and reminder to all residents that the last budget presentation is posted online as well. And if you want to know how your money is spent, please take a look and view it.
Thank you, Mayor. And this report will also be posted probably tomorrow. In addition, as we move along, all of the financial documents that are referenced here, the annual debt statement, the annual financial statement, those have both already been submitted to the webmaster for posting. If they didn't get up today, they'll probably get up tomorrow. When the budget is introduced on February the 25th, and the full budget will also be posted along with the new document that was implemented last year, referred to as the user-friendly budget, which takes all of this information and puts it into one document. But for tonight, we're going to review what I'm referring to as background information. All of this is relevant to how we construct the budget. We reviewed the spending side of the budget last meeting, the appropriations. Tonight is more focused on the revenue side, and we start with the annual debt statement. This document, this is just one page. This is the front page of the annual debt statement. The entire debt statement with all of the tabs are available online. That's it. If it didn't get posted today, it'll be up tomorrow for anybody who wants to review it in more detail. The front page gives basically a summary. And what you see is that we have 16.8 million, obviously as I speak I'm going to round these numbers off, $16.8 million in debt that is related to the school, 9.9 million, basically really call it 10 million for sewer utility number 1, that's WPC 1, and the bulk of that is the $7 million loan project, loan and grant project that we just did. There is then $223,000 in debt that's related to WPC 2, and the total municipal debt of 11.9 million. When you add all of those together, it's a total of 27 million, but only 11.9 of that is attributed to the municipal as our direct responsibility. And you'll see on the next page our the past 3 years of our equalized real estate property values of 3.2 billion, 3.3 billion, almost 3.4 billion, and the average for the 3 years of 3,318,105,368. That yields, when you go back and take the $11.9 million in debt, represents 0.359% of the total. And I added a note at the bottom. That note does not actually appear on the official debt statement. I added it for informational purposes, that per NJSA 40A2-6, 3.5% is the limit, the amount of debt that we would be allowed to carry without having to get any special permission from the local finance board or anybody else, and that amount is 116 million. So obviously we are well within the range that is permitted. Any questions on that before we move on? Okay. This next slide tells the story of our surplus balance at the end of the year, going back to 2007 when we had 3.4 million. 2008 it declined to 3.1, 2009 to 2.8, 2.5, and now we start in 2011 with a steady increase to 2.7 million, 3 million, 3.8, 4.7, and at the end of 2015, $4,888,580. I would also point out, I like to bring this up, I don't show it here, but if you go back to the early part of this century, 2000, 2001, 2000 in particular, there was virtually no surplus. When I arrived here in 2000, the surplus that was available at the end of 1999 was essentially all used in the 2000 budget. There was literally, I think, about $20,000 left.
Well,
So we've made a very steady, conservative, slow approach to managing the amount of surplus and using appropriate amounts in the budget to keep the tax rate stable. This next slide, for some reason, isn't fitting on the screen. Let's see if we can get it. All right. Well, anyway, this is where surplus comes from. How you regenerate the surplus that you use in the budget. And the first category is excess of anticipated revenues. So in miscellaneous revenues, we collected $194,000 more than what we anticipated as revenue in the 2015 budget. Delinquent taxes, we collected $102,000 more than what was anticipated as revenue. Now, that does not mean that we didn't know that there was more delinquent taxes. We actually had, I think, about $670,000 or $650,000 in outstanding delinquent taxes, but we did not anticipate collecting all of that. I think we anticipated $450, and we collected about $550. So that's where you see an excess of collections there, and that excess goes to replenish surplus. What you'll see when we get to this year's revenues is that because we had a really outstanding collection year in 2015, the amount of delinquent taxes that are still out there is now substantially less, and we will be anticipating less this year. So we'll get to that, as I said, in a little while. The current taxes, where we anticipated the amount for local purposes, we collected $1.3 million in excess. That also goes to surplus. Myrna is what we refer to, that's miscellaneous revenues not anticipated. That's a variety of miscellaneous revenues that we collect. In some cases, we know we're going to collect it, but we don't bring it in as an anticipated revenue because they might be short-term things that don't have permanency, like the temporary leases that we have on the cell towers that are paying rent to us, but at some point those are going to go away. So we don't anticipate them as a revenue to avoid having a structural imbalance there. Unexpended balances of appropriation reserves. That's the amount of money that was appropriated in 2014 that was not spent, and at the end of 2015 lapses into surplus. I can also tell you that the number for 2015 will not be as high. The amount of unexpended appropriations in 2015 was not as high as it was in 14. And then there's some other minor credits that also go into making up the difference. So that basically is how you get from $4.7 million that we had at the end of 2014. We used 2.8 of that as a revenue, and then we replenished it with these items to get to this 4.8. Okay. This is all in the annual financial statement for anybody who, again, wants to go see that in more detail. This is a summary of the anticipated revenues. Okay, now again, not the Myrna, these are the actual anticipated revenues. So in total miscellaneous revenues, we anticipated $1.8 million. We realized just over $2 million. This is the receipts from delinquent taxes. I mentioned in the previous slide we had anticipated $475. We actually collected $577. The amount to be raised by taxes was $9.4. We collected $10.7, and the library tax of $1,016,000, and obviously we collected exactly that amount. This is a summary of the revenues proposed in the 2016 budget. And the surplus is anticipated, and I apologize that I've actually made a correction to this, but I guess I failed to save the corrected version on my flash drive. We're going to anticipate using $3,050,000 in surplus, or an increase of $250 over last year. Total miscellaneous revenues, this includes grants. That's $2,597,000, and you see a large increase there of $759. The important thing to remember here is that grants do not impact the amount to be raised by taxes or the tax rate. They are money in and offsetting appropriation. And the biggest chunk of this $759 is the Safe Routes to School grant that we received last year that we're now appropriating because we're going to spend it this year, as well as a $100,000 grant that we received to make the installation of the generator for this building a permanent installation. So although, again, you see a large increase here, that's mostly due to those two grants. Now, receipts from delinquent taxes, again, this is the other one that I changed after reviewing the annual financial statement and seeing that we had a decline in the receipts from delinquent taxes. So this is going to be reduced to $450, and you can see what I did. I took 50 from here and put it in surplus. So we're going to anticipate $450 from the receipts from delinquent taxes and $3,050,000 in surplus. And when we post it, I'll make sure that the correct version gets posted. So the amount to be raised for support of the municipal budget will be $8,438,915, and that represents an increase of $52,758. State aid is an estimated number. This is $836,467. That's the same that it's been for about the past 5 or 6 years. Until the governor actually presents his budget, we don't know what that number will be. My guess is it'll be the same. The library tax goes up $26,000 from the $1,015,000 to $1,041,000. This is state aid, tracking it back to 2007. 2007, I believe, was the peak year for us in the time that I've been here. We used to receive $1,256,000. It then started to be reduced in 2008, 2009, 2010. There was then a one-time increase in 2011, and it has been kept frozen at that level ever since. And as I said, I have not seen anything coming out of Trenton to suggest that it's going to go up or down. For our purposes today, I'm estimating it to stay the same. If it does change before we introduce the budget, then some other numbers will change with it. If it goes down, then the amount to be raised by taxes is either going to go up or you're going to use more surplus or something. If it is increased, the state typically would order us to reduce the amount to be raised by taxes so that you don't play games. They like to take credit for giving you state aid for property taxes. This is the municipal purpose tax rate. Again, this is the money that we collect to fund our operations, separate from the school and separate from the library and separate from the county. This does include the open space tax for comparative purposes. Back in 2007, that 28 cents included it, so that we're comparing apples and apples. I've added it in. The actual rate for 2016 is 0.272. So when you add in the 0.005 for the open space, that's how you get to the 277. And what you readily see is that if you go back to tracking from 2007, we had just the slightest tick up in 2008, another little tick up in 2009, a full penny in 2010, and if you match this against the surplus numbers where we were using less surplus and less surplus available, there's a direct correlation there. In 2011, we were able to bring in just a slight decrease, kept it the same in 2012, a little bit down in 2013, 2014, a little bit down, 2015, a full penny reduction, and this year, virtually the same as last year. It'll be a slight, 1/10 of a cent reduction. And the bottom line is that the rate in 2016 is less than the rate was in 2007. I think that's a testament to the way that we have conducted our fiscal affairs. We've taken a very conservative approach. We've managed our surplus, used it well to keep this rate level. So the bottom line is anybody who has a home that has not been revalued since 2007, if you haven't made improvements or done anything that led to an added assessment, your tax for your local purposes is the same in 2016 as it was in 2007, and actually slightly under that. Okay, so the only people that would have seen an increase in their taxes for local purposes would be people who have made renovations or additions or tore down a house and put up a new one. Any increase in the amount to be raised by taxes was all borne by those changes. This is the levy cap bank calculation, and I'm actually going to pull up the sheet from the levy cap workbook to go through this. But again, the quick answer here, quick message here, is that every year since the levy cap, and this again for people who don't understand the terminology, the levy cap is a cap on how much taxes you can raise and bill your homeowners. The appropriations cap is a limit on spending. The levy cap is a limit on taxation. And since 2012, we had $585,000 in cap bank that now has expired, that's no longer available. 2013, which was available to be used through 2016, was $366,000. 2014 to be used in 16-17, $423,000. Last year, 2015, we were under $654,000, and this year's budget will be $471,000 below the levy cap. So when you add that all up, since 2012, when the levy cap was instituted, we are over $2.2 million below what we were allowed to levy per the state 2% levy cap. So we would have been able to bill an additional $2.2 million and still have been in compliance with the state's levy cap. These last few slides show you a comparison. You see school taxes in 2007 were $25.8 million. In 2015, it was $35.8 million. So you saw fairly substantial increases each year. I'm not making any editorial comment. This is just the facts. County taxes, you see a similar story, went from $7.3 million to $8.4. Over the last several years, the county has been able to keep their budget pretty flat, but one of the things that I've cautioned people about in the past when the county talks about having no increase is that doesn't necessarily translate into no increase for Chatham Township, because the county adopts a budget and an amount to be raised by taxes, and then it is apportioned out to the municipalities based upon your equalized values. So if our values are going up and other towns are staying flat or maybe even being reduced, then our portion of the county tax goes up. And that's why you see in 2013 it was increased by $300,000 over the prior year. In 2014, a couple $100,000. Last year was virtually unchanged. And I don't know what to expect yet this year. This takes those and puts them all on one sheet. So you see the school from 2007 to 2015, the county and the municipal. And you'll see, as far as the rates go, the school went from 92.8 cents up to $1.16, almost $1.17 in 2015. We went from, the county went from 2.66 up to 2.74. So as I said, they've been able to maintain a pretty flat rate over that same period of time, and we have gone from 28 cents to 0.277, virtually unchanged during that period of time, with a little bit of up and down in the middle. Okay, that's the end of this particular presentation. If anybody has any questions or you want to go back and discuss any of these in more detail.
Yeah, I just want to, again, just commend you, Tom, for doing these presentations. I think it's very helpful for the committee and certainly for our residents to understand that, the strong fiscal discipline that we adhere to here in the Township Committee, and always trying to use resident tax dollars wisely. You did have this summary levy cap calculation worksheet here, and I just want to point out one thing, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, if I'm misstating it.
So people can follow along.
Oh, you got it, good. Can we talk to the new ratables? We've got over 37.
Yes, Mayor. There is, I think some misperception that the added ratables, the fact that Chatham Township has been able to weather the economic storm and the housing crisis, and that we've seen added ratables each year, that's the reason that we've been able to do what we've been able to do. And it's frankly only a small part of the story. If you slide down to what would be starting at line 32. Let me just go through the whole thing. I think it would be better so people can understand it. At the top, you see that the amount to be raised for taxes, by taxes for municipal purposes in 2015 was $8,386,000. When you apply the 2% levy cap increase to that, that's the amount that you're allowed to increase, the adjusted tax levy becomes $8,553,890. There are then some exceptions, some adjustments to that based on the levy cap law when it was adopted that allows for some credit for increases in health insurance costs over and above a certain beginning point. Allowable pension obligation increase, and you see that here of $92,000. Allowable LOSAP, that's the length of service awards program that we have for the volunteer fire departments and emergency squad, and the annual allowable debt service, the increase in debt service. We also did a special emergency appropriation last year to fund work that needed to be done for the compliance with the fair share housing and the affordable housing issue. So those exclusions total $255,000. When you add those to the $8,500,000, you now come up to an adjusted levy after the adjustments of $8,808,000. This now is where we factor in the increase in ratables. We were fortunate enough in 2015 to have $37,231,000 in added ratables. Again, that is for new construction and additions to existing homes and other improvements, that added value of $37,231,000. When you apply the municipal tax rate to that of 0.272, what you wind up with is $101,000. That's what those new ratables yield, $101,000 out of $9 million. So it's nothing to sneeze at. It's certainly better than being in a negative position, but it is a relatively small benefit. It is not how we've been able to hold the line. We've held the line because we've held the line on spending. We have reduced the size of every department. We have made changes in the way that we insure ourselves for liability and workers' comp. We've made changes by joining the New Jersey State Health Benefits Plan. We've joined the New Jersey SEM for purchase of energy. We've done a lot of things that have led to permanent long-term savings. The reduction in personnel in particular is really the key. We have fewer police officers now than we did 15 years ago. We have fewer public works employees than we did 15 years ago. We certainly have fewer administrative staff than we did 15 years ago. And those things have been the major reason that we've been able to hold the line and maintain a steady fiscal position. Okay? And again, this levy cap workbook, this entire workbook will be posted on our website, and people can go through it at their leisure. The first page is the data entry sheet. This is basically where everything gets plugged in, and then the other various tabs self-calculate. So this was the levy cap calculation. This is a shared service worksheet. You'll see that there's one for the health insurance, so you see how that exclusion is calculated based on what the prior year expenditure was, what the current year expenditure is. And there's actually two different appropriation caps that have to be calculated, one from the 2010 and one going all the way back to 1977, which was the original cap law. There's the pension contribution calculation sheet. So I said all of these tabs, this is the LOSAP, these are all the ones that then are pulled forward into this sheet, which tells the whole story. Okay?
Great. Thank you, Tom. And again, commend you and the other departments for doing more with less over these years. And I think, this proposed budget reflects, again, the fiscal discipline of the township. And I think few municipalities, if any, can match to what we've been able to accomplish over the years. So thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, Tom, I actually would ask that maybe you could give us a little bit, we talked about this before, about the importance or the latitude that it gives the township to carry a surplus on the books of some $4.8 million. I know that cash flow, obviously, you've got money coming in and money going out during the course of the fiscal year, and the importance of carrying a number like that on the books, if you'd be so kind.
Well, there's a variety of reasons. The main thing that we use it for really is to maintain a stable tax rate. We don't want to see, we don't want to, for lack of a better term, jerk people around where we're, manipulating the number and having a tax increase one year and a tax decrease the next, and spiking up and down. We've tried to keep it stable and level, and that's really the main reason. There's then, a bit of an art, and it's really at your discretion as to how much of the surplus you want to use. My recommendation here is to use $3,050,000 of the $4.8 million. You certainly could choose to use more. If, for example, you wanted to have a penny decrease like we did last year, you'd have to use about another $300,000 or $330,000 of that. What that then does, though, is it exposes us to the possibility in the future of not hitting our revenue goals. And the worst thing that could happen to us would be to anticipate certain collections and a certain rate. For our purposes, we use a collection rate of 97.2% of the levy. That is the number that's used to calculate the reserve for uncollected taxes. And there's nothing magical about that number. We could change that up or down a little bit if you wanted to adjust the reserve, and that then impacts how much surplus you're going to generate. The danger is that if you miss your target, if something happens in the economy and the economy tanks and for some reason people don't pay their taxes, you have a double whammy the following year, because you're going to have a deficit that you have to make up, and your reserve for uncollected taxes is going to go through the roof at the same time, and you're going to then see a very large tax increase in 1 year. So we try to manage it. We take a conservative approach to it. You certainly could use more. There are certainly people that you will probably run into, at sporting events or cocktail parties that will argue that we should use more, that money belongs to the taxpayers and that we should give it back to them. That's a policy decision for you to make. That argument can be made. But instead of you give it back today, it may very well be that next year you're taking it back in a tax increase. So, that's not the way that we've done it. We've tried to use a reasonable amount in order to maintain a stable tax base, a stable tax rate.
Thank you.
Mike?
No, I guess I would just, the headlines that strike me are, just as Karen said, we have $4.8 million in surplus, but balanced against that, we're taking the $3,050,000, and that's money that we don't have to raise by taxes this year. So I mean, that's a major plus for the tax rate right there. And I think another way maybe to express that cap levy figure of, over the last 5 years, of 2.3 million, I guess, is the
Right.
total amount of the cap levy, is that's money that we have not taken out of taxpayers' pockets.
That's
That
correct.
basically, that's the direct result of the fiscal conservancy, conservatism that you just described. And that's, so that even though, you know, being conservative is kind of people describe it and would define it differently. I mean, everybody's conservatism is a little bit one way or a little bit the other way. And I think that this is a balanced way to look at it, and it's certainly, with those two numbers balancing against it, what we have saved and what we then each year can roll back over from the surplus to not have to.
And let me be clear, when I use the term conservative, I'm not using it in a political way. I'm talking about a safe,
Yeah.
conservative approach to the way that we budget and the way that we manage our fiscal affairs.
Very good. No, very good.
Thank you, Tom.